Okay, good evening, everyone. Can everyone hear me? Yes? Okay. So, welcome to Empty Cloud Monastery for another period of meditation. So, I see a few new people, which is wonderful. Um, and, of course, many people who have come here several times. So, happy that you're all here to practice with us. So, we'll start with a few minutes of guided meditation, lightly guided meditation. Then I'll give a Dhamma talk and we can take questions at the end. Um, is there anyone here who's completely new to meditation practice? Totally new? No? Okay. Is there anyone who's new to meditation practice but too shy to admit it? No? Okay. So starting by settling into a sitting position, uh, especially if you're sitting on the floor, it's good to start by rocking your hips side to side a bit. Really paying attention to the feeling of your body pressing against the cushion, noticing how the pressure shifts. And you'll find that there's a certain position where the weight is evenly distributed on your sitting bones. There's not too much pressure anywhere in particular. You can let your body settle into that position. You can try sitting a bit farther forward on the cushion. If you're sitting back on the cushion, sit a little farther forward. See if that also helps to relieve any pressure on your sitting bones. And also start rolling your pelvis back and then forward. Begin noticing how that changes the feeling in your spine and in your lungs. Noticing how when you're too far forward, then it feels like strain. When you're too far back, your spine and your lungs collapse, and that feels like pressure. But somewhere in between, usually with the pelvis tilted a little bit forward, there's a position where the spine feels very naturally upright. The spine naturally extends easily and smoothly upright. The chest feels very broad and open, and your lungs feel very spacious. Then similarly with your shoulders, so you can try tilting your shoulders forward and noticing how that makes your chest collapse. Then bring your shoulders back. Notice how that makes the chest feel very spacious and open. So then keeping your shoulders back, just let them relax. So you have that broad spaciousness in your lungs, but with the relaxed shoulders. Similarly, tilting your head back, noticing how with the head tilted back, the throat feels very uncomfortable and it's a little hard to breathe. And tilting the head forward. Again, it creates discomfort in your neck and it makes it hard to breathe. So finding that space in the middle where the throat feels completely open and free, where the spine seems to rest naturally all the way up through the neck and through the top of the head. Finding that balanced position for the skull resting easily on top of the spine. And bring your hands together gently in your lap, the thumbs lightly touching. You can either close your eyes or you can have them about half open or a quarter open, pointed down at the ground, about 1 meter in front of you. If your eyes are open, then don't look around, keep your eyes still. If your eyes are closed, make sure you don't fall asleep. If If you start to get sleepy, then open your eyes. And bring a slight smile to your lips. And take a few long, slow, deep breaths. So maybe 2 or 3 or 4 long, slow, deep breaths. With each exhalation, just letting the body relax. So there's nothing you need to do. No activities, no plans. There's nothing you need to remember. There's nothing you need to worry about. So take a moment just to enjoy the feeling of ease that comes from not having anything to do. The sense of relaxed spaciousness. And not needing to do anything at all. And in the middle of this relaxed spaciousness is your body. Your body is the center point which anchors the mind in the present moment. So bring attention into your body, settling the mind in the center of your body. So you might center the mind at your hands where they touch in your lap. Or you might center your mind inside your abdomen or in your chest, wherever feels natural to you. And wherever you center the mind, keep it there. So not moving the center of your attention around, but keeping it at the same point, the same location within your body. And from that center point, feel your whole body all at once. Feeling the entire body as a single radiant object. Bright, pleasant, peaceful object. Solid, warm, soothing object. So really enjoying the feeling of being solidly anchored in the present moment with this soothing, pleasant experience of the body. feeling your body as intensely as possible, as strongly as you can, like you're turning up the volume on your bodily sensations. As if your body was your favorite music, every sensation another note in the symphony. And you want to hear every note so clearly, loudly, precisely. So feel your body as if listening to your favorite music with rapt attention, joyful attention. Letting the body be completely still and letting the mind be completely still and alert within the body. And we remain aware of all the sounds and smells. We remain aware of the emotions and memories and thoughts drifting through the mind. We're aware of these things, but we pay no attention to them. We take no interest in them. We only take interest in the body and the sensations of our own body. Everything else is irrelevant, unimportant. We know it's there, but we're not interested. We're only interested in feeling our body with intensity, with stillness, with enjoyment. you find yourself getting distracted or lost in thought, and as you focus attention on your body, you can silently repeat the word focus. So just thinking the word focus, focus, focus. Slowly, gently repeating this thought until the mind becomes silent and stable. Then you can let the word fade away and just stay focused on your body, enjoying the peacefulness and alertness of mind that comes through awareness of the body. Letting the mind settle deeper and deeper into stillness. It's bright, awake, joyful stillness. Take a deep breath. Let it out slowly. Start slowly moving your body. Rocking your hips side to side a bit. Release your hands. Tilt your head side to side. Loosening up any tension in your neck. And twist your spine a bit. And check your body if there's anywhere in particular that needs a little extra attention. Maybe your knees need a little bit of a rub. Maybe your shoulders or your shoulder blades can use a bit of a massage. Just check in with your body and see if there anywhere that could use a little extra help. So this time I'll give a Dhamma talk. So we'll start by paying homage to the Buddhas. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. So we've come together this evening to practice meditation and discuss the Buddha's teachings. So one thing that I think is really worth remembering is reminding ourselves why we're practicing meditation. So why is it that we're doing these mental exercises? There are so many other things that we could be doing with our time. Other things which might seem more entertaining or more exciting. Things which might seem more fun or more enjoyable. So why are we spending our time practicing meditation? And your answer might be, because my mom dragged me to the monastery against my will. That might be the answer. For at least one of the people here, that may be the answer. You wanted to come? Oh, okay, that's good. That's good. We'll talk more later. Yeah, it's good to ask ourselves, why are we practicing meditation? Why are we interested in doing this difficult practice, which takes years, decades to master? Why? Why are we doing this? And the answer may be different for different people. But I think for most of us, when we look inside, we may come up with some other answers initially, but as we keep exploring, eventually we'll come to a very simple answer, which is we're meditating because we want to be happy. We have different reasons at the beginning. You might say something like, well, I'm meditating because I want to attain enlightenment. That's a great answer, by the way. But then the answer is, the next question is, well, why do you want to attain enlightenment? And the answer for that is quite simple, because enlightenment is the highest happiness. Why do you want that? Well, because you want to be happy. So it comes down to being happy. Or maybe you say, well, I'm meditating because I have too much stress and anxiety. Well, why do you want to get rid of your stress and anxiety? Because then you'll be more happy. So it still comes down to happiness. Whatever your reason is for meditating, if you look at it, eventually you'll probably realize that it really does just come down to this one simple basic wish, which is the wish for happiness. So remembering also then that our meditation practice, therefore, is a practice of developing happiness. It's a practice of learning how to be happy. It's a practice of training our mind. Training our minds to always be happy under any circumstance, under any condition. And noticing how then into our meditation practice, we then tend to bring all of our habits of unhappiness. So when we're meditating, this is what we keep running up against. So we notice sensations in the body that we dislike, and therefore we become unhappy or disturbed or dissatisfied or discontent. It's like, well, I don't like sitting still for long periods of time. I don't like how my legs feel. I don't like how my back feels. I don't like how my breathing feels. Well, or I don't like the sound of the birds, or I don't like the sound of the airplanes, or I don't like the sound of the dog barking. Like we go on these little inner tirades about why we have every good reason to not be happy. What are we doing to ourselves? We're actually teaching ourselves to be unhappy. That's what we do. When we sit here going on our inner lament about how much it hurts to sit still for half an hour, what are we doing? We're just teaching ourselves to be unhappy, that's all. Which is the exact opposite of what we've come to meditation practice for. Or when we're sitting here fantasizing about the much more entertaining things we're going to do when we go home, once again, what are we doing? We're teaching ourselves, busted. We're teaching, we're teaching ourselves to be unhappy. We're teaching ourselves to be agitated and full of craving, rather than teaching ourselves to be calm and peaceful and content. So during meditation practice, what we're coming up against is all of our ordinary habits of unhappiness. And we're starting to realize how much of our mind, how much of our mental habits and patterns are mental activities which keep us caught in these cycles of dissatisfaction, discontent, unhappiness, which keep us unsettled, which keep us agitated, which keep us disturbed. And we start to recognize that that's all optional. It's all unnecessary. Because when we put our attention on our meditation object, so in the instructions I gave, it was focusing on the body. So this is the meditation practice that I talk about the most often. And there's good reasons for that. It's relatively simple, it's relatively straightforward, and for most people, it's relatively effective. And the Buddha himself spoke about mindfulness of the body over and over and over again. This also was one of the practices the Buddha most often recommended, is mindfulness of the body, for the same reasons. It's pretty simple, and for most people, it's pretty effective. It works quite well. So then when we put our attention on our body and we really try to just do this practice of being still and alert and focused, just really enjoying the peacefulness of being right here with our body, well, what does that feel like? And we start to discover that there's a peacefulness of mind, a joyfulness of mind, which happens when we put down all of our normal mental habits of self-torture, which is what we're actually doing most of the time. Most of the time, we're just torturing ourselves with our mind. So all that time when we're thinking about the fun things we're going to do later, we might think that's a pleasant activity, but when you look more closely, you realize it's just self-torture. You're just constantly harassing yourself with the thoughts of the more entertaining things you could be doing. Is that fun? Is that enjoyable? No, not really. But then when you put all your attention on your body and you really just focus on being completely present, completely aware, completely content with this bodily experience right here, then how does the mind feel? The mind feels very peaceful. The mind feels very happy. The mind feels very settled and relaxed. So in this, we're starting to discover unconditional happiness. We're starting to discover a peace and joy which doesn't rely upon getting anything in particular. It just relies upon shifting our frame of mind. It just relies upon shifting our perspective on our experiences. It relies on shifting our relationship to our sensations, shifting our relationship to our body and mind, shifting our relationship to our thoughts, our emotions, our sensations. So learning how to be content with this moment just as it is, whatever it is. not seeking anything outside of this moment, not seeking anything at all, but learning how to be completely with this moment, and to completely enjoy this moment, whatever it is. So again, Buddhism is not a practice of self-denial. We practice renunciation, but that's because renunciation is another word for happiness. When you're happy, you don't need anything. When you're content, you don't need anything. So the happy mind naturally practices renunciation. So renunciation then is it's not a way of denying ourselves happiness. It's actually the exact opposite. It's a way of allowing ourselves to be completely happy. So by putting down our usual search for entertainment, our search for pleasure, our search for distraction, our search for some external condition, whether it's a person or an activity, or a certain kind of food, or whatever it is that we think will make us happy, by putting down that search, then we open up to the possibility that we can be happy right now. We open ourselves up to the possibility that happiness is accessible right here in this moment. So renunciation then is, once again, it's not self-denial. It's actually opening ourselves up to the possibility of true happiness, the possibility of happiness in every moment. So last week, Ayagya Lanyani gave a really lovely talk about renunciation. A talk so lovely that we had several people then ask about becoming monks afterwards, which filled me with joy because I'm a monk and I clearly enjoy being a monk. So I'm admittedly a little bit biased here, but I think monastic life is great. And anyone who's sincerely interested should explore that interest. It's really worth tasting it and seeing if it's what you're after. But yeah, keeping in mind that ultimately what we're trying to do is to learn the causes of happiness. What is it that actually allows us to experience happiness? And conversely, what are the causes of unhappiness? What are we doing that's keeping us caught in these ongoing cycles of discontent? What is it that's producing dissatisfaction in the mind? So constantly watching our mind in every moment. So whether you're meditating or not, even as you're going throughout your day, whatever you're doing, constantly checking in with your mind. What is the feeling in the mind? Does my mind feel happy or unhappy right now? Does it feel satisfied or dissatisfied? Does it feel content or discontent? What's the feeling in the mind in any given moment? And then looking more deeply, why does it feel that way? And whatever answer you come up with first is usually quite superficial. It's like, well, I'm not happy because why? I'm not happy because I'm not eating brownies. Or I'm not happy because my partner's in California. I'm not happy because there's no music during this meditation. Seriously, what's wrong with these people? I'm not happy because the airplane drowned out the last few words he said. I'm not happy because my body hurts. Like, we always come up with some excuse, but look more deeply. Why do you think that's making you unhappy? Because you want things to be different. You want your body to feel differently than it does. You want your partner to be here instead of on the other side of the country. You want it to be dinner time instead of listening to boring monk time. You want it to be quiet rather than a loud airplane time. So in other words, you're not accepting the moment as it is, and that's why you're not happy. You're not accepting your present moment experience. You're not content with this experience just as it is, and that's why we're not happy. So, and there's two basic ways of talking about Buddhism. There's the complex way. So if you want that, we have a series of Abhidhamma courses on our YouTube channel. You can get the complex form of Buddhism. And some people, that's what they want because it sounds so complicated that they think, I'll never figure this out, so I might as well not try. And then they go back to their sensual life and figure, well, Buddhism is too much. I'll get to that in a future life. Back to the ice cream and the romance. That's a lot easier. And that's fine. If you want to go the complicated route, that's fine. And realistically, you will have to wait for another life. Most people are not going to get the complex approach anytime soon. Maybe if you've been a monk for 40 years, you can get it. But the rest of us, we have a ways to go. But the simple approach is, as Venerable Robina Cortine says, it's so simple it's embarrassing. Why are we unhappy? Because we want things to be other than they are. That's it. Can't blame anybody other than yourself for this one. It's not the airplane's fault that you're unhappy. It's not the monk's fault that you're unhappy. It's not your body's fault that you're unhappy. It's not the food's fault that you're unhappy. It's not the dog's fault that you're unhappy. It's your fault. And it's your fault for what you're doing with your mind right now. So at first that can sound a little confrontational and even upsetting. But on the other hand, it's also putting the power right in your own hands, which is where it's been all along. As long as you think it's somebody else's fault that you're unhappy, then what you're doing is you're relinquishing the ability to be happy. As long as other people have the power to make you unhappy, then you will never have true happiness. You'll always be the victim of other people. So if you want to go through life as a victim, then again, that's your choice. You'll never be happy. You'll have temporary moments of pleasure, but you'll never really be happy. But when you're willing to take responsibility for your own suffering, when you're willing to face up to the fact that the only reason you suffer is because you were choosing to suffer in this moment, the moment you take responsibility for your own suffering right now, then you also gain the power to be happy. You gain the power to choose to be happy, which is also done right now. It's not done after this talk ends. It's not done at some distant point in the future when you have better concentration and more knowledge of the suttas or whatever. It's not something that happens after you shave your head and get these nice brown robes, though that is an option. Again, come and talk to us after the talk if you're interested. I'm looking at you, though. I think you're still a little too young. When you're a bit older, we can talk about it. You're old enough, though. You can come. It's something that happens right now. And if you just missed that opportunity to be happy, well, I've got good news. You just got another chance. And it's right now. And if you missed that opportunity, well, good news, you just got another chance. So in Buddhism, we have good news and we have bad news. So is this still working? Okay, it is. The light went up. Anyway. We have good news and we have bad news. So the bad news is that enlightenment is phenomenally difficult. It's extremely difficult. The good news is that you get infinite retries. More bad news, we've already done this countless times and failed countless times. More good news, you get as many tries as you need. But at some point, you'll realize that the only opportunity for awakening is right now. And it's never been any other time, and it never will be any other time. It only ever is right now. And again, enlightenment is not complicated. Again, you don't need to go to university in Sri Lanka or India or Thailand for 4 years, 8 years, 10 years. You don't need to get advanced degrees in Buddhist philosophy. You don't need to read the whole Tipitaka and all the commentaries and sub-commentaries and sub-commentaries. You can if you want to, and those things can actually be very helpful to do. At a bare minimum, it's really good to read the suttas. It gives you a good foundation for understanding what the Buddha was teaching, is to read the Buddha's discourses. It's helpful, but it's not strictly necessary. Again, for many people, that's actually just an excuse. It's like, well, I don't have enough information yet to attain enlightenment. I need more knowledge before I can attain enlightenment. Well, that's just an excuse we use to avoid looking at our mind right now, to avoid looking at what's going on in our mind right now. The whole cycle of suffering and happiness is right now. whole cycle of birth and death and rebirth and redeath. It's right now. So look at this mind in this moment, seeing the impermanence of every condition of body and mind right here and right now. Recognize the unsatisfactoriness of trying to cling to any experience, of craving any sensation. See how unsatisfying that is. See how that breaks our happiness. The moment we start wanting anything, we lose the ability to be happy. And recognize that any self-identity we have is always connected to something that is temporary. And therefore, that can't possibly be who we really are. So if you just see these three simple truths in every moment, then that's already enlightenment. And the more deeply you see it, the more complete that enlightenment is. And if you see these three truths with perfect clarity, then you can become just as enlightened as the Buddha. You can discover the exact same infinite wisdom of the Buddha, just through seeing these three simple truths in every moment. Seeing in every moment that every single thing is impermanent, unsatisfying, and impersonal. Absolutely everything in every moment. So just see each moment in this way. And two things will happen. One, with every passing moment, you'll get happier and happier. And two, with every passing moment, you'll get closer and closer to enlightenment. The wisdom of the Buddha will naturally unfold within your own mind. And then when you do read the suttas, you'll understand what they're talking about. When you do read the suttas, you'll realize that this is the wisdom of these three simple statements. It's the wisdom of knowing for ourselves the choice to be happy in each moment. Recognizing for ourselves the causes of happiness and the causes of suffering. And recognizing that we are responsible for those causes. We are responsible for those choices. Nobody else, nobody other than us. And again, people often make excuses. They say like, oh, well, I can't possibly attain enlightenment in this life because fill in the blank. People love to make excuses. I'm too old to attain enlightenment. What kind of excuse is that? Oh, I'm too young. Well, what kind of excuse is that? They say, well, I'm too stupid. Well, the Buddha had stupid disciples too. Somehow they turned out fine. So it's actually not a function of intellect. Wisdom is not a function of intellect. It doesn't matter what your IQ is. It doesn't matter how good you are at math. It doesn't matter how good you are at science. It's completely irrelevant. What matters is, can you see how you create your own suffering in each moment? And can you stop? That's all that matters. Can you be perfectly content just with full awareness of this moment, just as it is? There's an interesting story. I think this is actually from the commentaries. I don't think it's from the suttas themselves. But it was of a monk who was actually very stupid. And he went to the Buddha and he complained. And he said, I can't understand any of your teachings. Like, it's too complicated. I don't get it. I can't even remember them, let alone understand them. And the Buddha gave him a broom. And he said, well, then just sweep this path and pay attention as you're sweeping. Be completely present as you sweep. And the monk was sweeping and sweeping and sweeping and sweeping and sweeping. And one day it finally dawned on him. It finally dawned on him that he was generating his own suffering. And he didn't need to. That when he was completely present with the act of sweeping, that in that present moment awareness, he was no longer generating suffering. And in paying full attention to the act of sweeping, he was observing impermanence. He was watching the dust and the leaves being swept aside. And he realized that he could also sweep aside the cobwebs in his mind. He could sweep aside the dust in his mind. He could see clearly in that moment. So he attained awakening while sweeping the paths in the monastery. So again, he didn't need to get a PhD in Buddhist philosophy. Rather, what he was doing was practicing meditation while sweeping the paths in the monastery. So again, it's not a function of intelligence. It's not a function of gender. So some people, they make the excuse of, well, I've got the wrong body. Well, what kind of excuse is that? The Buddha had enlightened men and enlightened women. It doesn't matter what kind of body you have. You can attain full enlightenment no matter what kind of body you have. It doesn't matter. Ultimately, what we're doing is we're training the mind. So it doesn't matter. Also, it doesn't matter if your body is crippled or deformed or chronically ill. These don't matter whatsoever, because none of that has anything whatsoever to do with the mind. None of that has any relevance whatsoever to wisdom. Wisdom is being able to see the body as it is and recognize that this body is not me. This body is not mine. This body does not define me. This body does not control me. So we use the body as an anchor for attention, but we also recognize that the body is not our true self. It's just a piece of meat, that's all. It doesn't matter where we're from. It doesn't matter what languages we speak. So whatever excuse we come up with, when you look at it more closely, you realize there's really no valid excuse there. It's also good to remember, I like to reflect from time to time, that the Buddha himself said that before his awakening, he had experienced every possible form of existence within samsara. Every single possible form of life, other than an awakened being. He'd experienced everything else. From the lowest hells to the highest heavens, he'd experienced everything. That means he also had lived as every imaginable kind of human life, including the life you're living right now. The Buddha himself lived this very life at one time, probably long ago, but he lived through exactly the same confusion, exactly the same suffering, exactly the same doubt, exactly the same anguish, exactly the same boredom, exactly the same body, exactly the same health problems as you. So whatever condition you're in right now, for the Buddha, that was one step on the path to awakening. So that means you also are following in the footsteps of the Buddha. So whatever circumstance you're in right now is not an obstacle to the path. It's just another step along the way. It's only an obstacle if we decide that it's an obstacle. It's only an obstacle if we decide to convince ourselves that enlightenment is too difficult, too far away. And actually, if that's how we feel, then sometimes the best thing to do is to just focus on taking the next step. Sometimes the goal does seem very distant, because realistically the goal is really distant. But what matters is not how far away the goal is. What matters is, can you take the next step? So what is the next step? Well, usually the next step is very simple. Pay attention to your body. Pay attention to your mind. Practice contentment. Practice mindfulness. Practice compassion. Practice generosity. So these very simple practices that we do over and over and over and over and over again, and that slowly reshape and transform our mind. So starting from the surface level of the mind, this bleeds down to transform the subconscious layers of the mind, slowly rewriting the mind over time. A great example of this is loving kindness meditation. So just bringing up this simple thought, may everyone be happy, may everyone be happy. And when you first start doing this, it just seems like some silly words that you're repeating in your head. Like, may everyone be happy, may everyone be happy. Holy heck, this is stupid. May everyone be happy, may everyone be happy. And you're just doing it over and over again. And then somewhere down the line, maybe after a few minutes or a few days or a few years, somewhere you find yourself thinking, may everyone be happy. And you really mean it. You look at people and you're actually thinking, oh, may she be happy. May he be happy. May they be happy. Like something shifts in your mind. And instead of looking at the world with eyes of hatred, you start looking at the world with gentle eyes, caring eyes. and you realize that something shifted in your subconscious mind. Something changed. By changing the conscious patterns of mind over and over and over again, those changes start to bleed down beneath the surface. They start to change our subconscious patterns as well. And that's when we realize that the mind is trainable. Even the deepest, deepest habits of mind are trainable. They can be changed. It takes time, it takes persistence, but it can be changed. So that means that all of our flaws, all of our delusions, all of our defilements, all of our greed, all of our hatred, all of it can be changed. It's just a matter of time. So yeah, we might think, oh, complete purity of mind, infinite wisdom, infinite compassion, the Buddha mind, that's all way beyond me. And it's like, okay, fair enough. Yeah, probably is. But can you take one step in that direction? Can you make your mind a little bit gentler, a little bit sharper, a little bit calmer? Then that's one step towards Buddhahood. That's one step towards the infinite wisdom and compassion of an awakened being. You don't need to jump all the way there right away. Unless you're practicing Zen Buddhism, but we'll talk about that another time. You don't need to jump all the way to the goal in one step. You just need to take the next step. Even a small step forward is a lot better than no steps at all. And even when we backtrack, even when we get caught up in our old bad habits, which realistically is going to happen, and it's going to happen often. So get used to it. Backsliding is part of the path. As long as we recognize that's what we're doing, and we recognize that it's not making us happy, it's just disturbing us even more, and then we recommit. So even when we fall back on our old habits of greed and hatred and aversion and confusion and delusion and so on, daydreaming and spaciness and distraction, then just recognize that's what we're doing. We're backsliding into our old self-destructive patterns, and recognize, oh, this actually isn't making me happy. All it is disturbing my mind. It's just making me unhappy. So even when you're indulging in your defilements, if you recognize that it's weakening your happiness, then you're cultivating wisdom. This is an important point to keep in mind. Whatever circumstance you're in, if you reflect on it in terms of Dhamma, then you can cultivate wisdom. You might still be feeding your defilements. You might still be feeding your greed and your hatred. But at least you'll be feeding your wisdom as well. And eventually, that power of wisdom will help you to break your defilements, to help you to break those bad habits. But you do need to be patient with yourself, because this is a process that takes some time. And we've already been at it for a long, long, long time. This is part of the good news of Buddhism, by the way. The mere fact that you're at a Buddhist monastery, practicing Buddhist meditation and listening to Dhamma talks is already an indication that you've been practicing the path for many, many, many lifetimes. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here today. You'd be off at a dance party or something instead, which I wouldn't blame you. Realistically, I wouldn't blame you, because these are just the stages that we go through. As we wander through samsara, we go through our stages when we're just totally committed to sensuality, because we don't know anything better. We think that is the highest happiness. We don't know anything better. And we go through times when we're just depressed and grumpy and irritable all the time, because we don't know any better. We start to recognize that life sucks, but we don't know any other way to live. That's also just one of the stages that we go through as we're trying to find our way to true happiness. So the fact that you're here now, practicing the path, exploring the path, that indicates that you've already developed very strong roots of spiritual practice in past lives. You've already made a lot of progress on the path. So you can also reflect, yeah, enlightenment takes a long time, usually hundreds of lifetimes, but we've already been practicing for many, many, many lives. We've already made a lot of progress in order to be where we are today. So it's not a million steps left to go. It's maybe only 500,000 steps left to go. Starts to sound a little more reasonable, a little more doable. You might as well keep going forward. And also recognizing that every step along the path is a joyful step. It's a pleasant step. It's a happy step. It's a peaceful step. So I think I've said more than enough for the evening. So if there's any questions or comments, I'm perfectly happy to take questions or comments at this time. Does anybody have anything they'd like to bring up for discussion? Yeah, go ahead. It's not a shortcut, by the way. It takes just as long as every other path. So there's actually no fastest route to enlightenment. They're all equally slow. But in Zen Buddhism, one of the techniques that they sometimes use is to, and actually this is used in some schools of Tibetan Buddhism as well, which is identifying with the goal. Rather than thinking, I am an unenlightened being with lots of defilements, instead you bring up the reflection, I am already the Buddha. I am already inseparable from the mind of the Buddha, which is technically true. One way of looking at things is that we are objects within the mind of the Buddha. So the Buddha mind is so vast that it encompasses the whole universe, the whole multiverse, and that includes us. So we also are within the vast wisdom mind of the Buddha. It's just that we're a little confused and we don't recognize that. So we still have some work to do. But sometimes it's a really powerful reflection to think, I am already within the mind of the Buddha. I am already inseparable from the Buddha. I am not different from the Buddha. Sometimes that perception can break through certain barriers in the mind. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Yeah, also there's a meditation practice which it's actually present in Theravada Mahayana and Vajrayana, but it's usually the most emphasized in the Zen schools. The practice of immediately dropping all objects, which also means dropping all defilements, all obstructions, all hindrances. Just right in this moment, drop everything. And in so doing, then you can perceive the unconditioned. So this is an extremely direct way of practicing, which is also extremely difficult. So this is the leaping directly to the goal method, which in theory can take you all the way to full enlightenment in a single instant. But in actuality, you wind up having to practice for a few hundred lifetimes to figure out how to do it in one step. So again, you don't wind up actually saving any time in the end. There's a lovely story. Many years ago, somebody was talking to the Dalai Lama. It was a Western person who had become Buddhist. And they asked the Dalai Lama, what's the shortcut to enlightenment? And the Dalai Lama started crying and he said, this is why there's so few enlightened people in the world. Any other questions? Yeah, go ahead.
There's one in the stream. What do you do about sensations when you have hurt yourself or have serious health problems? How do you get away from wanting to be pain-free or sickness-free?
Stop wanting to be pain-free. Stop wanting to be sickness-free. Make peace with the way your body feels. So whatever your body feels like in this moment, you cannot escape that. So we think, if I move my body, then it will stop hurting. If I take some pills, then it will stop hurting. If I do this exercise or that stretch, then my body will stop hurting. And those all may be true statements, but all of those statements are putting happiness in the future. I'm much more interested in happiness in the present moment. I've never experienced the future. I keep hearing people talk about it, but I've never actually experienced the future. I've only ever experienced the present moment. So I'm not interested in trying to find happiness in the future. I'm much more interested in finding happiness in the present moment. And the way you find happiness in the present moment is to be at peace with the way your body feels, whatever it is. So you might still do your stretching and do your medicines and do your treatments and so on. That's all fine. But happiness is accepting your body just as it is, accepting your sensations just as they are. So the way to be happy with your body is to stop wanting it to be free of pain. Just accept that your body has pain. That's how bodies are. Stop wanting your body to be healthy. The nature of bodies is that sometimes they're not healthy. In fact, all bodies eventually decay and fall apart. That's just what they do. All bodies are subject to sickness. Um, Hopefully the past couple of years have made that point inescapably clear. All bodies are subject to sickness. So wanting it to be otherwise is just one of the ways that we convince ourselves to be unhappy. Kind of crazy when we put it in those terms, isn't it? We're always convincing ourselves to be unhappy. Why do we do these things to ourselves? It's just mind-blowing. Why don't we convince ourselves to be happy instead?
It's not even us convincing ourselves, it's more like your surroundings convincing you that if you try to do what you're doing, like say if you are in pain and don't go to the doctor, check yourself, they think you're like really cuckoo, you have to,
Well, still go to the doctor. So this is an important point, is that if you're sick, you go to the doctor, definitely. But when you feel that you're sick, be at peace with feeling sick. As you're on your way to the doctor, be at peace with being on your way to the doctor. When you're in the doctor's office, be at peace with being in the doctor's office. When the doctor gives you prescriptions, be at peace with the prescriptions.
all that's okay. Say for instance at home or wherever you are, say because of a particular physical inability, you're not able to do a certain function that helps the rest of the people around you. They'd be like, why don't you go check yourself? Why do you make all these excuses? Why do you not do this? This is how, so you're prompted, even if somewhere deep inside, like if I go with what you just said, right? I do understand it's a body and it's all transient and whatever. Then you have to still go and check yourself because you're able to not function the way the surroundings expect you to function.
Yeah, that's all fine as long as you're doing all of that with a peaceful mind. Um, and often what we're doing is for the benefit of others. I remember many years ago I went to visit a monk at a monastery in upstate New York. So it's this very friendly Chinese monk in this little Mahayana monastery up in the middle of nowhere. And I was talking to him, and somehow the subject of seatbelts came up. And he said, it's our duty as monks to wear seatbelts. Because if we die in a car accident, then we can't help other people. And that just, for some reason, that just really blew my mind. I was like, oh my, he's so right. So now every time I get in the car, I put on my seatbelt because I'm thinking this is my duty as a monk. It's my duty to stay alive and healthy so I can help other people. So in the same way, we might be totally at peace with our body being unhealthy and in pain and so on, but we take care of it sometimes not for our own sake, but for the sake of the people around us. So that's also a perfectly good reason. We keep ourselves in good condition so that we can be of benefit to others. But still, all along, recognize the fact that the nature of bodies is that sometimes they hurt. And we need to learn how to be at peace with pain because it is inescapable. Um, Again, if you have a health problem, go to the doctor. That's totally fine. So Buddhism is not anti-medicine. It's not anti-doctor. The Buddha himself had a personal doctor. And he allowed, actually, in the monastic rules, he made extreme leeway for medicines and medical treatments. Like we have a lot of rules about when we can eat and what kinds of food and so on. But when it comes to medicine, the Buddha made it almost completely open. We can take almost anything as medicine, almost any medical treatment. And a tremendous number of the rules don't apply when you're sick. So when you're sick, a lot of the monastic rules just don't apply to you at all. So the Buddha was very realistic when it came to dealing with health problems. He was very practical. As a general rule, the Buddha was extremely practical. But he also taught very clearly to learn how to be okay with body sensations that are bitter, sharp, painful, even life-threatening. So that even if you're literally dying, you can be happy and calm as your body dies. Because that's going to happen someday. Can we be happy and calm as the body dies? Most people, the answer is no. But if you practice the Buddha's teachings with sincerity and diligence, then you can face death with a happy mind, a calm mind, a peaceful mind. Even the most horrible, painful death, you could go through it with a peaceful mind. Okay?
Another question in the chat. Good evening, Venerables. What does Satori mean in Zen Buddhism?
Satori?
Satori. Sorry, not
Yeah, Satori. It means sudden awakening. So a moment of insight. So usually in Buddhism, insight develops gradually over time. One simile that's used is like walking through fog. As you're walking through fog, you don't realize you're getting wet because it happens gradually. But after a few minutes, you suddenly realize that your clothes are soaking wet. Another simile that's from the suttas is the simile of a woodworker with a tool, like a hammer, with a wooden handle. And every day, the woodworker is using that tool. And then after a few years, the woodworker realizes that there's an imprint of their thumb in the handle of the tool. And they can't say, oh, well, the thumbprint happened on day 3, or the thumbprint happened on day 102. They just know that after a few years, now there's a thumbprint in the handle. So usually that's how Buddhist wisdom develops, is gradually over time. So almost imperceptibly, day by day, the mind becomes more and more immersed in the wisdom of the Buddha. But there are also moments of breakthrough where we have a sudden shift in how we perceive our experience. We make a sudden leap of a few steps. So normally it's one slow step after another, but every now and then we have a little leap where we jump forward a few steps. So Satori, the sudden awakening experiences that can happen with certain kinds of Buddhist practice in particular. It can happen in any kind of Buddhist practice, but particularly with certain styles of Buddhist practice, it can happen more often. Those are those moments when you have a sudden leap forward a few steps. But don't put too much importance on it. Even in the Zen schools, they normally say, don't get too obsessed with those moments. Just keep practicing with sincerity and diligence. The important thing is persistence in our practice, rather than trying to seek out some kind of special experience. Any other questions?
Mona, you had a question? I wanted to sort of, if I can wrap my head around it, kind of like a summary. So you were saying that to be happy is essentially not to mind if you are not happy now. Is that what you're saying? Like accept the moment as it is right now. So if I'm not happy now, if I accept that, I will eventually come to be happy.
You could talk in that way, but I would say accept the conditions which you think are making you unhappy. So ask yourself, why am I unhappy? And usually you'll have some answer. You'll say, I'm unhappy because I'm hungry. Or I'm unhappy because I miss my brother. Or I'm unhappy because fill in the blank. So then just be content with whatever you think is making you unhappy. And then you'll realize that you're happy. Just by accepting that condition, you're happy.
So what you're saying is kind of like the sky and the clouds, and then if the sky is there, the clouds are there. But if I wait for the clouds to clear to see the sky, and they miss the fact that the sky is already there.
Yeah. 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 Anything else? Go ahead.
I recently heard the term non-attached appreciation. I think it was something like that. I was curious if you knew if that's even the right term or something, because it keeps on popping in my mind.
I haven't heard that particular phrase.
Or unattached, I can't. But it was the idea of kind of like just appreciating things in the moment, but realizing that just like everything, the good and bad does flow, and not get attached to the idea of I'm going to stay this particular way. But I may be.
So what I would say is to appreciate wholesome qualities of mind. That's something that the Buddha definitely spoke about. And not to be attached to any particular condition. So recognizing that all conditions are temporary. So if you base your happiness on any specific condition, then you will experience unhappiness inevitably. So not to base your happiness on any specific condition, and to appreciate wholesome qualities of mind. So non-attached appreciation, yes, of wholesome qualities of mind. But not like non-attached appreciation of rave parties. That would be off the track of Buddhism. I'm actually not entirely convinced there's even such a thing as unattached appreciation. Because even the Buddha would recognize what's wholesome and what's unwholesome. But there was no attachment to anything in his mind. There's just the recognition. This is wholesome, it leads to enlightenment. That is not wholesome, it leads away from enlightenment. But could you even say he appreciates the wholesome? It depends on how you define the word appreciate. So we would have to get into definition of terms. So this is one of the complications of language, is that we think we're talking the same language, but often we're using the same words in different ways. And that can lead to a lot of misunderstanding.
Perhaps use Bhante to give the connotation that it's not the end of the practice is not becoming alienated by things. So sometimes teachers or monastics might use different words to give it a connotation, so that it's clear that we are not trying to become robots or
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. And it's really worth keeping in mind that the qualities of an awakened being's mind are joyfulness and kindness. So it's not like a detached, heartless robot. Awakened beings are the most compassionate, happy people you can ever hope to meet. So if that's what they mean by unattached appreciation, then we can go with that.
I don't know, I just heard the term recently and I wasn't sure even what they meant exactly.
Yeah, I'm not sure either.
I think it was not attached appreciation, but
yeah, I don't know. I haven't heard this turn of phrase before, so I could only speculate.
I think also how Bhante Suddhaso, like last night, for example, he said positive attachment. So to somewhat clarify that it is not an alienated type of state, and we're not aiming towards indifference, but we're aiming towards something that is actually wholesome and happy. And so whenever you meet very accomplished monastics, for example, very senior monastics who've been in the robes for many, many years, and they are reputed to be enlightened, they're really, really happy, really comfortable, really, just delicious to be around. They're not just robots. Whatever, if I'm eating ice cream or I'm eating feces, it's the same thing. That's not what we're aiming at. But they won't have a strong reaction of, oh, there's ice cream, or look at that horrible thing. Like, they will always have a very cool. Actually, Bhante Suddhaso's preceptor, Jampasano, is a very striking example of that. Someone who is extremely happy and radiant. Well, the Lord met him, so
it's like you see it and feel it the second you see him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Instant Yelp review.
Another one from the chat. Is it okay to do some contemplation on some Dharma facts after a period of a samadhi, or is it best to be silent till the answer to your previous question comes up spontaneously, like an insight you just mentioned?
It's always fine to contemplate the Dhamma. So there's different activities that we can do in Buddhism that cultivate different qualities. So samadhi practice is very important. I find that most people don't do enough samadhi practice, so I tend to emphasize it a lot. But it is also very important to contemplate the Dhamma, because it's through thinking about and considering the Buddhist teachings that we come to a deeper intellectual understanding of them. And that intellectual understanding then forms the framework for experiential understanding. So yeah, contemplating Dhamma is a useful thing to do. So you just need to decide, what do you want to do in that moment? Do you want to deepen your samadhi, or do you want to do some contemplation to strengthen your wisdom? It's kind of up to you. Either one is a wholesome thing to do. Yeah.
Does Satori occur due to practice from previous lifetime?
And also this lifetime. But yeah, the conditions we develop in previous lifetimes are quite influential in terms of how easy practice is in this life. So some people, they come to Buddhism and they just get it really quickly and easily. That's because of practice from past lives. And other people, they practice for a long time in this life, and as a result, they develop a lot of proficiency and wisdom from the practice they do in this life. So it's both. It's both past lives and also this life. There are some people who they either they're born in Buddhist cultures, and from a very young age they already have a very advanced understanding, or maybe they're born in a non-Buddhist culture, and then when they encounter Buddhism, it just clicks very easily for them. There are people like this, and again, it's from past lives. There's no other explanation. Anyway, we're just about out of time. If there was maybe one more question, I could take one more.
No, looks like that's it.
Okay.
Yep.
Oh, Lloyd.
You were mentioning that even there's wisdom in seeing the defilement as you were in the middle of it.
Yeah.
Can you expand upon that? Because
So the ordinary person has defilement, but doesn't recognize that they're destroying their own spiritual qualities.
But
the ordinary person is, for example, they're caught up in craving, and they're just thinking, maybe they're even thinking that's the right thing to do. They're thinking like, well, of course, reckless sensual indulgence is the way to happiness. So they just recklessly indulge in sensuality, thinking that they're doing the right thing. Whereas a spiritual practitioner, they might be like, I have a very strong craving for sensual indulgence. I know it's not a good idea, but I'm going to do it anyway. Well, they have the wisdom of knowing that it's not a good idea. So that's a step up from the person who doesn't have the wisdom of knowing it's a bad idea. So go ahead.
Like, and this is personal anecdotal experience, right? And not the central, but like aversion, right? And I can see in all the ways, mentally, through non-sobriety, through whatever way, and I'm aware in the moments, like, this is aversion. Why am I going through this? Why is this the decision that I'm making now? Okay, well, it seems like the right decision this time, but I know it's not going to lead me to be happy later on. Maybe in this moment I'll forget something, and not just sobriety, but just mental side. It somehow doesn't square in my mind with seeing it. And I understand there's wisdom in seeing it and understanding it. But how long can that continue before it just kind of feels like an exercise, right?
Yeah. So what you're doing then is you're simultaneously developing two things. You're strengthening your defilement, aversion in the case that you mentioned, and at the same time you're also strengthening your awareness of the degradation of that defilement, your awareness of how that aversion is poisoning your own mind. So you're simultaneously building up your aversion and your wisdom. And the hope is that eventually your wisdom will win out. So the best thing, of course, is just not to indulge your defilements. That's always the best thing. But the point I was making is that if you do find yourself indulging your defilements, at least be aware that that's what you're doing. Remind yourself that you're doing something unwholesome. Pay attention to the drawbacks. Pay attention to the discomfort that you're causing yourself. Pay attention to the weakening of your spiritual faculties as you indulge in your defilement. So my point in bringing that up was not to encourage you to indulge in defilement, but rather to use even your moments of backsliding as an opportunity for developing wisdom. So rather than just diving wholeheartedly into your defilements, always try to keep your wisdom faculty going, even when you slip into old bad habits. And that's how eventually things start to turn around. So it's very normal when people start to really commit to Buddhist practice. It's very normal that they go through periods of backsliding. But if you keep building up that wisdom faculty, then your old bad habits will start to lose their savor. They just won't be as interesting anymore. You'll be doing it, but you'll be like, this just isn't as fun as it used to be.
I will say you are 100% correct with that.
Yeah.
Undoubtedly. But I was listening to a talk recently from Ajahn Kovalo, and he was talking about food, but it could be anywhere. Where is this a wholesome thing to put in my body or not wholesome?
Mm-hmm.
And you were mentioning that too, and looking at every situation and one's reaction. Is this a wholesome or unwholesome reaction? It's hard to do in the moment.
Yeah. Yeah, but when else are you going to do it? And you can also reflect on the past. You can be like, well, in the past I did this and results were pretty bad. Maybe I should try not to do that again. That works. But you also need to pay attention in the present moment. Try to catch yourself before you slip too far down the wrong path. And as soon as you catch yourself, turn around. Doesn't matter how far you've gone, turn around. Okay. So I think we should stop. We're past time now. So thank you all for coming. So we're... please go ahead.
Oh, well, we can end with 3 sadhus. That's traditional to do.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And we're still doing the 6 o'clock